Every year, major publications and magazines pull literary experts to crown the greatest children's books of all time. Take the recent BBC Culture Poll. It asked 177 critics worldwide to rank everything from the gentle nursery rhymes of Winnie the Pooh to the dark wizards of Harry Potter on the exact same scale. The problem is how these lists define their audience. They treat children as a single, monolithic reading block, squashing the developmental needs of a 2-year-old and a 14-year-old into the exact same category. Notice how a 300-word picture book like Where the Wild Things Are is plotted right next to a 500-page high fantasy epic like The Lord of the Rings. Critics ignore a decade of cognitive development to place them side by side. A master list that lacks developmental context doesn't actually help you build a library. It sets a trap for anyone trying to buy a book for a kid. Well-meaning parents, aunts, and grandfathers buy these critically acclaimed top titles, only to watch them go unread. Worse than wasting money, pushing a developmentally inappropriate book can actively turn a child off from reading altogether. A toddler can easily breeze through a light rhythmic story, but hand a 7-year-old a dense, mature classic like Watership Down, and you're handing them an overwhelming chore. So how do you filter out the critical noise and adult nostalgia to curate a library that actually matches a child's current cognitive stage? You have to abandon the idea of a universal best book. Instead, you need to use a scenario match framework. This decision tree flowchart maps out how to buy for different stages, starting from the center question, who are you buying for? Let's follow this first branch down to the infant and toddler group, ages 0 to 4. At this stage, you are looking for highly visual board books with strong rhythmic cadences. Think of creator-driven works like those of Eric Carle, who understood that early reading is primarily a visual and tactile experience. These books serve a very specific function. They establish reading as a safe, comforting bedtime routine, while introducing baseline concepts like colors, shapes, and counting. The trade-off is their extremely short shelf life. With zero narrative complexity, a child will entirely outgrow these books by the time they hit kindergarten. Literary depth does not matter here. Your only goal is sensory engagement and building a daily routine. Moving back to our decision tree, the focus shifts to the next path, the early reader, ages 5 to 8. This is where parents often fall into the nostalgia trap. You want to share the critically acclaimed classics that you remember loving when you were younger. You reach for titles like Alice in Wonderland or The Hobbit. Books written by authors like J.R.R. Tolkien use elevated vocabulary and dense, descriptive prose. The slow pacing and complex language in these older books can quickly overwhelm an early reader. If you choose these, you will spend most of your time acting as a translator, breaking down archaic sentences instead of actually reading the story. The alternative is a modern early reader chapter book. These series are engineered specifically for this age group, using optimized vocabulary and tight pacing. They bridge the gap between picture books and full novels, giving kids the confidence to read independently for the very first time. The downside is that they will feel highly formulaic to you as the adult, and they completely lack the philosophical depth of the older classics. But at this stage, building a child's confidence to read on their own has to take priority over indulging your own nostalgia. Looking at our tree one last time, we shift to the final branch, preteen and middle grade, ages 9 to 12. Here you encounter mature epics that are frequently mislabeled as standard children's books. This includes A Wrinkle in Time or J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter series, which lean heavily into complex thematic world-building. These books succeed because they treat their audience with respect. They engage preteens with complicated themes of good versus evil, grief, and personal agency. However, that thematic depth requires intense peril, character deaths, and complex moral ambiguity. Because of that intensity, these stories are entirely unsuitable for children under 10. The critics might group them in with picture books, but the content requires a level of emotional processing that younger kids simply haven't developed yet. Your role shifts at this level. Since the generic children's label is far too broad, you must actively vet every theme to ensure it notches your child's specific emotional maturity. To summarize how these lists go wrong, we can plot these categories on a matrix. This chart measures nostalgia and classic status on the x-axis against immediate child engagement on the y-axis. Toddler board books populate this top left quadrant. They deliver high engagement for a 3-year-old, but carry very low nostalgia value for older kids. The dense classics land down in the bottom right. They hold immense nostalgia for adults, but offer highly variable, often low engagement for any child under 8. The middle grade epics hit the top right quadrant. They achieve both high nostalgia and high engagement, but with a strict condition. They only work for the 9 to 12 demographic. If you give a critically acclaimed, great book to a child at the wrong developmental time, it functions exactly like a bad book. If you are a relative buying a gift, do not purchase a dense epic for a 6-year-old just because you recognize the famous title. Unless you know the child's exact reading level, stick to modern, proven early readers that are engineered for accessibility. If you are a parent to a toddler, lean into the visual mastery of creators like Maurice Sendak. Use those picture books to build a consistent bedtime ritual, not to conduct early literary analysis. If you are parenting a preteen, treat those critic lists as a menu, not a mandate. Vet the themes of loss or peril against your specific child's emotional maturity. Those arbitrary top 100 lists might be interesting for critics to debate, but they are useless for actually stocking a child's shelf. Ignore the critical rankings. A successful library is built by selecting books that serve as specific developmental tools for where your child is right now.